The galaxy had long memories, and among those memories lingered one name that was never spoken lightly: Baba Yaga. To most, it was no more than a story told in hushed tones, a warning passed from elder to youth, a shadow that crept at the edges of power. For others, those unfortunate enough to cross her path, it was not myth, but the last thing they had ever known. Across 1,000 systems, the legend of a human deathworlder, who could not be stopped, haunted rulers and soldiers alike. Some claimed she was immortal. Others said she was a weapon birthed by Earth itself, designed to strike terror into species that once underestimated humankind. The truth was simpler. She was one human among billions, but she carried within her the madness and resilience that had allowed humanity to rise from a death world where everything tried to kill them. For decades, the galaxy had avoided testing her patience. Those who remembered the wars of expansion, when humans clawed their way into space with fragile ships and indomitable will, knew what one determined human could do. And if one human was dangerous, then Baba Yaga was embodiment of that danger distilled into flesh. She had appeared when arrogant warlords, empires, and syndicates tried to shackle Earth's people. Each time, she left a trail of corpses behind her and then vanished into obscurity, letting the galaxy rebuild in the wake of her fury. That was her pattern: strike, destroy, disappear. Until recently, most had assumed she was long gone, perhaps dead of old age, a story to frighten children. The Galactic Empire, in particular, dismissed her as nothing more than a fabricated myth. But myths are often born of truth, and the truth was that Baba Yaga had lived long enough to raise a daughter. Her child was 22, the light of her life, untouched by the blood-soaked path her mother had walked. For all the galaxy knew, this young woman was merely another human among countless others, studying, building friendships, even serving as an emissary between her people and the wider galactic community. She had grown up far from the shadows, encouraged by her mother to find peace where Baba Yaga herself had only ever found violence. Those who met her daughter often remarked on her warmth, her determination, and her ability to listen. Some even joked that the daughter was the antidote to the poison her mother represented, a symbol of what humanity could bring besides terror. Her mother never told her all the stories, never revealed every scar. Baba Yaga had sworn that the sins of her life would never stain the future of her child. She trained her only in what was necessary: self-defense, discipline, and the quiet understanding that humanity survived because it was always underestimated. Beyond that, she gave her space to grow, to love, to live. And yet, fate never allows peace to last. The Galactic Empire was vast, spanning sectors upon sectors, its fleets patrolling lanes of trade and conquest. For centuries it had ruled with unchallenged authority, crushing rebellions and consuming lesser civilizations. The Empire tolerated humanity as it did many other young races. Useful as mercenaries, troublesome in their independence, but ultimately too small to threaten the throne. To them, humans were just another species to intimidate, another pawn in their endless political games. What they did not understand, or what they willfully ignored, was that humanity thrived not because it was the strongest, but because it was the most relentless. The Empire's leaders laughed when whispers of Baba Yaga resurfaced. They scoffed at the idea that one woman could shift the balance of galactic power. To them, such legends were for weak-minded aliens who clung to superstition. They believed themselves untouchable, and that arrogance drove them to make the single greatest mistake in their history. The Emperor's council saw the young human woman, Baba Yaga's daughter, not as an individual but as a tool. She had been working as a junior diplomat during tense negotiations, trying to mediate between human colonies and imperial overseers. Her presence was meant as a gesture of goodwill, proof that humans sought cooperation rather than confrontation. But the Empire saw opportunity in her vulnerability. The order was given quietly, under the cover of political necessity. A message had to be sent. Humans would bend or break. And what better way to prove it than by striking at the heart of the legend itself? By harming the daughter of the one name that still carried weight in the shadows, the Empire would prove the old myths false. They would show that even Baba Yaga's bloodline could be touched without consequence. The ambush was swift and merciless. During what should have been a routine meeting on a neutral station, Imperial operatives struck. They did not bother to hide their cruelty, for they wanted the galaxy to see. The young woman was beaten, her pleas ignored, her body left broken, as guards dragged her before the very council that had arranged the trap. Some accounts say she was killed outright. Others claim she survived the assault, but would never walk the same again. The details were twisted by rumor, but the one fact no one could deny was that the Empire had laid hands on Baba Yaga's daughter. The recording spread faster than they anticipated. Perhaps it was leaked deliberately by a horrified witness, or perhaps the Empire intended it as propaganda. Whatever the case, images of a young woman's suffering were seen across countless systems. And in every corner of the galaxy, those who heard the name Baba Yaga went still with fear, because they knew the galaxy held its breath. Merchants ceased their chatter, soldiers muttered uneasy prayers, and even rulers who once laughed at the legend began to wonder if they had doomed themselves. In backroom taverns and war council chambers, the same whispered words echoed, "She will come." The Empire's leaders congratulated themselves at first. They believed they had struck a blow against human pride, that they had proven the myth a lie. They expected silence from Earth, fear from the colonies, compliance from those who had dared to demand autonomy. They could not imagine that they had set into motion a storm unlike anything they had ever faced. Some tried to warn them. Alien allies, remembering the scars of past encounters, begged the Emperor to reconsider, to issue an apology, to make reparations before it was too late. But arrogance deafened the Empire to reason. They could not comprehend that vengeance was not merely possible. It was inevitable, for Baba Yaga had been silent for decades. But silence does not mean absence. In her exile, in her years of quiet, she had not grown weaker. She had only grown patient. And now, her patience was at an end. The message reached her. Accounts differ on how. Some say she was contacted directly by trembling diplomats who feared what would come. Others say she sought the truth herself, sensing the shift in the galaxy like a predator scenting blood. What is known is that the moment she learned what had been done to her child, something changed. The woman who had once been content to disappear into legend returned to life. Whispers spread across the stars. The Baba Yaga was awake. There was no need for proclamations, no grand announcements. It was enough that people knew. Across ports and colonies, smugglers, mercenaries, and soldiers all shared the same rumors. The moment the truth reached her, there was no hesitation, no time wasted on grief, no visible crack in her discipline. Baba Yaga did not scream or rage. She simply began to move. That was what made her terrifying. Her fury was cold, focused, absolute. Every step she took was deliberate. Every choice part a pattern only she could see. And when she committed a vengeance, there was nothing in the galaxy capable of halting her course. Her first strike came without warning. An Imperial listening post in a remote sector went dark. The station was heavily fortified, bristling with automated defenses, manned by loyal officers who had survived campaigns against countless insurgents. No alarms were raised, no distress call sent. When a relief fleet arrived, they found silence. Every guard was dead, every system disabled, every record wiped clean, except for a single symbol burned into the wall, a human handprint, crimson with blood. It was enough. Those who remembered the stories recognized the sign, and panic spread like wildfire. The Empire dismissed it as sabotage, an act of terrorism by human rebels. But their denial carried little weight when, days later, an entire convoy carrying high-ranking Imperial officials was reduced to drifting wreckage. Their ships had been boarded, their crews slaughtered, their escorts obliterated with precision too surgical to be the work of amateurs. Survivors, trembling and half-mad, spoke of shadows that moved where no scanners could track, of a single human figure cutting through armored soldiers as though they were nothing. The Empire responded as it always had, with overwhelming force. Fleets were mobilized, bounty hunters contracted, planetary garrisons reinforced. The Emperor declared the hunt for the human outlaw his highest priority, and propaganda broadcasts painted her as a relic of barbarism. Yet beneath the public bravado, cracks began to appear. Officers whispered among themselves, remembering the stories their predecessors had told. Mercenaries, once eager for imperial contracts, quietly refused assignments that might pit them against her. Even governors, drunk on their own authority, began to question whether their power would shield them. Baba Yaga pressed on, methodical and unstoppable. She did not strike at civilians, did not waste time on meaningless destruction. Every target she chose was deliberate. Those who had signed the order, those who had carried it out, those who had enabled it. Governors were dragged from their palaces, admirals torn from the safety of their fleets, counselors found dead in locked chambers. She left behind no speeches, no manifestos, only silence and corpses. Her message was clear without words. This was justice, and none who touched her daughter would be spared. The Empire began to realize that this was not war as they knew it. Wars were fought with armies, with fleets, with strategies mapped across star charts. What they faced now was something entirely different. An executioner who moved unseen, who fought with no regard for the rules of engagement, who answered only to the law of vengeance. They tried to adapt, deploying elite commandos, flooding sectors with drones, even employing psychic hunters bred to track the untrackable. None succeeded. The hunters became the hunted, their deaths fueling the myth that grew with each passing day. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, species that had once cowered before the Empire now watched with cautious fascination. The legend of Baba Yaga spread anew, no longer whispered in dark corners, but spoken openly in council chambers and marketplaces. To the oppressed, she became a symbol of resistance. To the powerful, a reminder of fragility of authority. And to all, proof that humanity was not to be underestimated. The Empire's propaganda faltered. They tried to paint her as a deranged murderer, but each assassination she carried out was too precise, too focused. She did not slaughter aimlessly. She killed only those responsible, leaving innocents untouched, even sparing soldiers who had played no part in the crime. This discipline made her more terrifying, not less, because it meant her actions were not madness. They were justice, cold and inescapable. She carried with her memories of her daughter. In the still moments between strikes, she would recall her smile, her laughter, the way her presence softened even the hardest of hearts. Those memories sharpened her blade. This was not revenge or pride, not rage for insult. This was a mother's promise kept in blood. And in that promise lay a clarity of purpose that no empire could ever hope to match. Worlds trembled as she moved. On one colony, imperial forces barricaded themselves within fortified walls, convinced she would come. Days passed without incident. Then, without a single shot fired, the walls were breached. Guards who had sworn loyalty to the Empire vanished. Their bodies later discovered piled neatly in the command center. The governor was found seated at his desk, a neat line carved across his throat. Every system in the fortress remained intact, every civilian unharmed. It was as though death had entered, claimed its chosen, and departed without pause. The emperor grew desperate. He doubled rewards, declared martial law across entire sectors, and sanctioned atrocities against human colonies in an attempt to bait her. But every cruelty only deepened her resolve, every act of brutality feeding the fire that guided her. His attempts to draw her into the open failed, because she did not fight on his terms. She dictated the rules, and he was powerless to alter them. Fleets were dispatched to hunt her, entire armadas sweeping systems with advanced scanners. Yet ships continued to vanish. Sometimes they found only wreckage, sometimes nothing at all. Rumors claimed she could walk in vacuum, that she could appear and disappear at will, that death itself obeyed her command. Rational minds dismissed such tales, but fear does not bow to reason. Even the most hardened soldiers began to dread the moment when a shadow would move where it should not, when a figure would step from the darkness, and when their end would come with quiet inevitability. Her legend grew with each strike. She was not an army, but she waged a campaign that rivaled any war the galaxy had seen. And unlike wars that dragged on for years, hers was swift, decisive, and personal. The Empire bled leaders faster than it could replace them. Confidence eroded, loyalty faltered, and whispers of rebellion stirred in corners the Emperor could no longer control. The more he tightened his grip, the more his power slipped through his fingers. Baba Yaga left messages only in silence, but the galaxy filled the void with its own conclusions. To the enslaved, she was hope incarnate. To the ambitious, a warning. To the guilty, death approaching on quiet feet. And through it all, she never wavered. She remembered her daughter's last words, her last look, her last breath. Those memories were etched into her soul, fueling each act of vengeance. This was not a rampage that would burn itself out. This was a mission, one she would see through to its absolute end. The Empire had awakened her, and now the hunt would not stop until the throne itself was bathed in silence. The Empire was bleeding, and everyone knew it. What had once been considered the unshakable foundation of galactic order was now crumbling under the weight of fear. No matter how loudly the Emperor proclaimed strength, no matter how many fleets he dispatched or governors he replaced, the results were the same: silence where there had once been authority, ruins where there had once been command, death where there had once been loyalty. His empire had survived invasions, uprisings, and crises before, but this was different. This was not war. This was a slow, methodical dismantling of power by a single human who refused to be stopped. Rebellion simmered at the edges of imperial space. Species that had once bowed without question began to hesitate. Some withheld tribute, others whispered of open revolt, emboldened by the knowledge that the Empire could not even protect its own rulers from a lone predator. The galaxy had learned that Baba Yaga struck only at those responsible, that she spared the innocent, and in that precision she became more terrifying than any fleet. Her legend grew because she chose her targets with surgical exactness, and those who knew their hands were stained with the blood of her daughter lived in terror, never knowing when the shadow would fall across them. Inside the imperial court, paranoia consumed the highest ranks. Counselors accused one another of betrayal, officers executed subordinates to prove loyalty, and commanders abandoned posts rather than risk facing the wrath of the human mother. The Emperor, once surrounded by admirers, found himself encircled instead by trembling servants who feared that being too close to him would mark them for death. And still she advanced. The capital world, fortress of the Emperor and symbol of imperial dominance, bristled with defenses. Planetary shields, orbital platforms, and entire fleets formed a protective web around it. For centuries, no enemy had breached its security, and the Emperor trusted in its strength as his final refuge. But those who remembered whispered the truth. Baba Yaga had never needed armies to breach walls. Walls meant nothing to a figure who could pass unseen, who struck at the heart rather than the body. Her path toward the throne was paved with silence. Admirals who commanded the fleets surrounding the capital began to vanish. At first, their deaths were dismissed as coincidence or sabotage, but the pattern was undeniable. Each leader who held authority over the defenses fell one by one, leaving behind frightened subordinates with no clear orders. By the time the Imperial Senate recognized the danger, command had fractured beyond repair. And then she came. No one could later agree on how she entered the capital. Some swore she appeared in the heart of the palace itself, without tripping a single alarm. Others claimed she descended through the orbital fleets like a phantom, carving through the fences without slowing. The truth remained unknown, but the result was absolute. She was inside the fortress that no one believed could ever be breached. The palace guards were elite, veterans of countless campaigns, trained to kill without hesitation. None of it mattered. They fell as quickly as all the others, their weapons useless, their armor nothing more than decoration before the relentless human that pressed forward with singular purpose. She did not linger, did not waste energy on those who were not her target. She was a predator moving through a herd, ignoring all but the one she had come to claim. The Emperor awaited her in his throne room, surrounded by his most loyal guards. He projected an image of authority, but beneath the mask his fear was plain. For all his proclamations of strength, for all his belief in the invincibility of his empire, he now faced a reality that had spread across the stars. He had brought harm to the daughter of Baba Yaga, and now there was no escape. He begged at first, offering wealth, power, concessions. He promised to rebuild what had been broken, to restore peace between his empire and humanity. When his words fell flat against her silence, he turned to threats, declaring that killing him would plunge the galaxy into chaos, that billions would suffer. But Baba Yaga was unmoved. She had not come for politics. She had not come to negotiate. She had come to finish what had begun the moment her daughter cried out in pain. In the end, there was no spectacle, no drawn-out duel, no dramatic speech. The Emperor's head fell from his shoulders. rolling across the marble floor to rest at the foot of his throne. The silence that followed was deafening, for every guard who remained alive knew the truth. Their emperor, the most powerful figure in the galaxy, had been executed by a single human who asked for nothing and left nothing behind but death. The palace did not burn. The city was not destroyed. The capital itself remained intact, untouched save for the throne now empty of its master. That was a final message, sharper than any blade or proclamation. She had not come to conquer. She had not come to rule. She had come only to deliver justice, and justice had been delivered. The galaxy reacted in stunned silence. Across systems, news spread of the Emperor's fall, of the head left lying in the throne room, of the quiet departure of the human who had ended an age. For a time, no one moved, as if the entire galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do next. Rebellions erupted almost immediately. With the Emperor gone, the chains that bound entire species snapped. Some worlds declared independence. Others fell into civil war, and the once mighty fleets of the Empire scattered without central command. The fall of a dynasty that had endured for centuries was sealed not by another empire, not by war, but by a single human mother whose daughter had been harmed. And then Baba Yaga disappeared once more. No one knew where she went, nor did they try to follow. Her purpose had been fulfilled. She had never sought conquest, never sought dominion. She sought only justice for the one who had been taken from her, and when that justice was complete, she returned to the shadows from which she had emerged. Her daughter's name spread across the stars in a way the Empire had never intended. No longer a symbol of human vulnerability, she became the embodiment of peace destroyed, of innocence lost, and of the terrible price exacted when that innocence was violated. Entire species spoke of her as a martyr, her life a reminder what could have been her death or her suffering, the spark that toppled an empire. The legend of Baba Yaga deepened. Now she was not merely a shadow of the past, but the living proof that humanity could not be crossed without consequence. Empires had feared human resilience before. Now they understood that fear was not enough. Respect was demanded, for even one human was capable of altering the balance of the galaxy. The message was written not in words, but in history itself. Hurt the child of humanity, and the universe would bleed. No one dared challenge humans openly after that. Treaties shifted, alliances reformed, entire power structures adjusted in the wake of the Emperor's fall. Species that once dismissed humans as reckless deathworlders now looked at them with quiet dread, acknowledging that beneath their laughter and warmth lay a capacity for vengeance that could topple civilizations.